Today's session title is Communities of Practice, Social Fabric of Learning. The format for today's session is half an hour presentation by Dr. Andaleep Arshad, followed by a panel discussion and question answer session. If you have any query, please feel free to send your questions via Google form, and the link for the Google form has already been shared in the chat box. I would like to introduce our speaker. Today's speaker, Dr. Andaleep Arshad. Dr. Andaleep is the Director, Faculty Development, Kuwait Institute for Medical Specialization, Ministry of Health, Kuwait. He is Competency-Based Medical Education National Faculty Lead with Royal College, Canada. Dr. Arshad has more than 20 years of experience as medical educationist in internationally renowned organizations, including National Guards, Health Affairs, Saudi Arabia, and Al Khan University, Pakistan. His area of interest are training and development, curricular design, competency by design, assessment accreditation, and digital learning. So over to you, Dr. Arshad. We have participants online as well and in person. So if you have any question and any query, please submit your questions via the Google form. So over to you, Dr. Andaleep.
Thank you very much. Thank you all participants for your attendance, and thank you, Dr. Naveed and Dr. Shahid.
Can we ask you to speak a little louder?
Yeah,
I can't hear properly.
I'll come closer. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Kausar. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Osana.
Walaikum salam. Andaleep, may I request that you speak a little louder?
I will.
Yes.
Okay. So, of course, the first slide is disclosure, and of course, I don't have to declare a lot. I have not practiced. I've not done clinical practice a lot, so, but not involved in any commercial related activities. Isn't it pretty? This is Kuwait, photoshopped a little, but that is how we perceive it, and it is, right? The skies are blue, clear.
Dear Dr. Andaleep, I'm so sorry to interrupt. This is Kausar here. Please, could you speak a bit louder or bring the mic nearer to yourself? Thank you.
Okay, and then this is our Kuwait Institute. To close this. This is our Kuwait Institute for Medical Specializations. A very new building. We shifted only 2 years ago. And my office is somewhere on the back of this. This is the front of it. So my office is somewhere in the back, facing a little bit of sea and a little bit of Ministry of Health. So our Ministry of Health is, we are in that region where Ministry of Health is. So before I start the session, and before I go into the details and objectives and everything, there's this one, Gilbert's Law. It's called, like, you know, when you're working in different places, so there is a Murphy's Law, right? And then there are other laws. So this one is Gilbert's. It says that the biggest problem in the world or in work is that no one tells you how to do it. Let me park it here, right? And then as I go through the slides, I'll come back to it, right? So what we are going to do today is we're going to define communities of practice. We are going to describe legitimate peripheral participation, and we're going to explain situated learning. So before because communities of practice, the concept of communities of practice deals with learning, right? So let me spend some time on learning. We all feel that learning happens to individuals, right? You might disagree, but there is a general feeling that learning happens to individuals. Has a beginning and an end. Therefore, we have curriculum. Therefore, we have topics. Fine. Is best separated from other activities. You might disagree again, but then we do see schools, we do see universities, right? Where we take learners out from the environment and then we give them perhaps a safe environment to learn. And is the result of teaching. Teaching is something that happens in schools and universities, right? So what you see here in this first picture is she is a first-year resident, right? And she's palpating an attendant in an emergency room. And then the consultant is standing behind her, right? Learning is happening. Everybody agrees? Learning is happening, right?
Yes.
Now, these three boys, of course, with their aprons and, perhaps they have stats also there. We can identify them as doctors, right? I would say these are residents, fine. But right now, they're kind of on a break in the corridor and discussing a match, a cricket match that just finished yesterday, right? And Babar Azam did a very fantastic knock. So they're just discussing that, nothing else, not a bit of medicine, not a bit of medicine. Are they learning?
Yes.
I can't, so DEDAKU, who said yes?
I, Ruxana Zubairi.
Zubairi, okay, yeah. So we'll come back to it, right? And I agree, but we'll come back to it. Now here is a typical round happening, fine. But then look at this consultant. He's just listening to a story that this girl is telling him about her pet, right? And he's just like very interested in listening into that story. Do you think learning is happening here?
Yes.
Fine. So you see, the point is that learning has many dimensions. For example, could be structured, we can call it education also sometimes. So there's formal learning, there's informal learning. Communities of practice tries to to identify patterns in informal learning, but then it can be used in structured and formal learning also. We'll look into it. So the basic premise for communities of practice is that learning involves a deepening process of participation in a community of practice. So what they're trying to say here, that you have to identify which community you belong to, right? And then as you go on, your participation increases in that community in whatever different ways. It could be just telling a story. It could be just building a rapport, right? But still you are getting the tools to actually, learn properly, right? So you do keep on learning. Did I press the wrong? I think I pressed the wrong. Okay. Now, it came from these two people, Jean Lev. She is a social anthropologist. She has studied different communities in different parts of the world and tried to see how learning actually happens in informal environments or not that much structured environments, right? And then Wenger is an artificial intelligence person, because artificial intelligence, of course, has lots of information, but then they do have to learn a lot, right? So they do also need different algorithms to understand, right? And to imply so that the AI keeps on learning, right? So they have to see how humans learn, and then if that can be used with artificial intelligence also. Communities of practice are groups of people, as the name community shows, who share a passion for something that they know how to do. And that is how, because if I want to call myself as a part of a community, how do I know if I'm a part of that community or not? I share a passion for something that that community is doing, right? And who interact regularly to learn how to do it better. So the interactions have to be happening. If the interaction is not happening, then perhaps the community might be there, but actually not that functional. Okay. See, before I go into this picture, right, let me tell you something. I graduated as a doctor myself, right? But then, I've never practiced. So the most important thing which doctors do is like they practice. They do clinical practice. I never did clinical practice. But this thing about, me introducing myself as a doctor or people perceiving me as a doctor never goes away, right? So I came into education and education psychology. People still don't take me as an educationist. That's my primary work, but they don't take me as an education psychologist. They would actually, outside people, I'm talking about outside people, they always perceive me as a doctor. Let me give you an example. If you graduate and then you go into pharmaceuticals and you spend 25, 30 years in the pharmaceutical industry, and I have friends there, right? And still the pharmaceutical industry, and they're like now, say, regional director for something, right? Into sales, into, core pharmaceutical activities. But their colleagues inside, they would always perceive them as doctors first, right? So doctor, right? So the thing is, perhaps I have the legitimacy to be a doctor. So the first thing for you to be a part of a community is that you are a legitimate part of that community, right? So perhaps they would think that perhaps I am not that legitimate as an education psychologist than as actually a doctor, right? So different perceptions. Then I am a medical educationist. People in medical education or into health professions might perceive me that, okay, now he's not a clinician, he is only a medical educationist, right? But people outside our community might not be able to do that, right? So what is community? And like, why does that matter? Look at this picture. What is it? A tailor's shop, right? All of them are tailors or going to be tailors, right? So we could say that this is a community of practice of tailors, fine? Now, where was this picture taken? Which country? Pakistan?
No.
Indo-Pak?
No.
Anyone?
Probably in the Middle East. Probably.
Is very
Probably.
Probably, yeah. So this picture was taken in Egypt, right?
Ah, there
So the point is, a tailor's shop, and then in the environment inside a tailor's shop is almost the same wherever you go. Things are changing now. Things are industrializing, right? So that is, but still, if you go to a tailor's shop in Kuwait, you face the same difficulties. काम कभी time पर नहीं होगा, right? You tell them that this is something, please, if you can do the fitting, and I'm coming back in an hour, no problem, come in half an hour, right? But they won't do it in 2 to 3 hours even, right? So things are the same. You go anywhere. This is the tailors community. Okay, now within this picture, let me tell you something. Oh, sorry. This guy in blue, right? What is he doing? He's not in a machine, right?
I think he's cutting.
He is actually not cutting, he's ironing.
Oh,
Right?
okay,
So
I
he's
can't
pressing
see.
clothes, right? Now, you can call him just like he has just entered this shop, right? A year ago, he wants to be a tailor. So the tailors have asked him to do the other errands, right? To press clothes. And they've told them that you have to keep doing it for 1 year, right? And then perhaps we'll see if we can give you other work or not, right? So the point is he's still learning. He is just pressing clothes. He's running errands. Kisi ko chai chahiye. Anyone wants tea? He would go and bring that, right? Any delivery to be done, he would do that delivery, right? Is he still learning? Is he still learning as being a tailor?
Yes.
Right. ठीक है? ठीक है. Let me give you another example. DED, let's take a medical education department. A medical education department, right? DED in Aga Khan, for example. Now, there are different types of people working in a department. There are secretaries. There are people who we call as faculty. There are people who are administrators, right? Michael, for example, if Michael is still working, he's not working in DED anymore, but say, for example, he's been working in DED for, say, now 20 years, if he had continued, right? Who will become a medical educationist? Who will become within this, like their secretaries, there are faculty, there are administrators, who will develop, and they both, actually they are all doing and involved in doing the same activity, the medical education stuff, who consider themselves as a legitimate member of that very community. So if Michael considers himself as a legitimate member of the administrative support, within DED, he will develop himself as an administrative officer, right? So he will develop his administrative skills, his secretarial skills, right? Though he is inside medical education. Faculty are considering themselves as a legitimate member of the medical education, right, community. So they are developing themselves as medical educators. When I joined, I was part-time, 0.5, I was ISD, right? And 0.5, I was medical education. Let me tell you, I had no idea what medical education is when I joined. Medical education was very new and I was freshly graduate. I had no idea, right? I had lots of ideas about IT. I was a doctor, but still I had interest. I was doing a diploma in postgraduate diploma in computer science. I was doing programming, things of those sort, right? But I was with mentors like Dr. Zubairi, Dr. Talati, sitting with them, doing that stuff, started considering myself as a medical educationist, right? And therefore, and as I saw that perhaps, you know, I'm not a very legitimate member of ISD, right? I'm more better here. I perhaps started belonging to medical education. I developed in medical education, right? So it all depends on where you actually want yourself to belong to. So this person is in blue. If he thinks in his mind that he's going to be tailor, he came to this shop to be a tailor, he will become a tailor. But if he came here thinking that I want to be just a helping person, and that is it. I don't want to be Taylor. Perhaps he will never, right? So we talked a lot about legitimate peripheral participation. So some words to it. It's the mastery of knowledge and skills required. Newcomers to move towards full participation, right? In the process of a community. So either you are a part, you're outside the community, you're not a part of the community, right? If you consider yourself a legitimate member of the community, right? So then when you enter, you're in the periphery, there are people in the core, right? Now the point is the core keeps on changing, right? Sometimes someone would be in the core, right? Sometimes someone else would be in the core. So the core keeps on changing, right? And you also keep on, like, you could also keep on shifting. So you might be in the periphery in the beginning. This is what people say when you go to a new institution, be in the peripheries, understand the culture, understand what's happening, right? And then you become active, you can go back to the peripheries, you can be the core, right? So in communities of practice, that is the main thing that actually they focus on. For newcomers, the purpose is not to learn from talk. It is to learn to talk, right? So it is not the lectures actually that matter. It is actually you working with that community and, gelling yourself in that community and having the ability to talk as that community talks, right? So it is for you to learn to talk as a key to legitimate peripheral participation. So as you build that repo, you actually start coming towards support, right? Let me tell you, knowledge is just one small factor there. It's not your knowledge that brings you to the core. It's your actually taking leadership. It's your actually taking, active charge in that community activities, which brings you to the core. Knowledge comes as you do those things, right? It will keep on coming. Hey, haven't you heard this thing that we graduated and we studied for 7 years, right? In universities and whatnot. But then we learned where? When we came to the industry. We learned at work. When we came to work, we got to know that whatever we learned there in universities was just ABCD, right? Perhaps just gave us a vocabulary to actually start using here. And this at our place of work is actually where our learning happens with MHPE participants also, right? So you study lots of things, but actually when you start doing it yourself, right, independently perhaps, that is where you start learning. So it creates a social fabric of learning, fosters interactions and relationships based on mutual respect and trust. So see, knowledge, information do not account a lot when it comes to communities of practice. What accounts more is how you gel, how you respect people, how you trust them. Trust is very, very important, right? Encourages a willingness to share ideas, expose one's ignorance, ask difficult questions, and listen carefully. See, and this is how communities of practice is a little different from, this is how communities of practice is different from a structured work environment. In a structured work environment, we have hierarchies, right? If I don't know something, I perhaps do not feel that safe to tell in front of my bosses, right, that I don't know this, right? So, but if you are in a community, right, where there is no hierarchy doesn't matter. You can just ask them, how is it done? And nobody knows if you know or not, right? So you can just pose those questions. So that is the point of community, that you give them respect, and then you can you provide them the safe environment where people can expose one's ignorance, right? And ask difficult questions and listen carefully. So where is it? It's everywhere. Work, school, home, player. You are not member of just one, you're member of multiple. You're sometimes in the core, sometimes in the margin. It all depends on you, how you want to use it. Some communities have names, some are even nameless, right? It could be very structured, it could be fluid with no hierarchy, right? But the point is, even if it has a structure or if it is fluid, the hierarchy should not be there. If it is a hierarchy, if there is a hierarchy, then perhaps it is more of an office environment, right? Or an institutional environment. So what is it about? It's about the joint enterprise as understood and continually renegotiated by the members. So it is the members. It's not a top-down thing, right? It's not a policy matter that this is a policy and we all follow it. No, the community within themselves, they renegotiate, right? That, okay, we'll go like this or we'll go like that, right? So they renegotiate themselves. And what happens is it binds members together into a social entity. So a lot of bonding. And what do they actually develop? The value of being a part of a community is that you got some communal resources. You got routines, you have your own sensibilities, you have your own tools, artifacts, you have your own style, you have your own vocabulary. Khan University, for example, right? People working here, for example, in the nursing staff. I don't know, but I have this feeling they're a little different from from nursing staff from other institutions in Pakistan. Those other institutions might have their own culture, right? So we got so many nurses from Pakistan, from Khan University, right? In Kuwait, almost like 400 or 450 in the last 1.5 years during COVID times, right? Or perhaps a little lesser, but you could identify them very easily, right? And then even there, though now they are not a part of our Khan anymore, but in Kuwait, it's very easy for them to deal with each other coming out because they have a shared rapport, right? They have their own sensibilities, which perhaps others have it differently. Okay, so this is kind of a chart which tells us where do different other things lie. So community of practice is what we're talking about. But then, of course, when you're working in an institution, there are offices, which are like formal work groups. And then you have project teams. So community of practice is different from project teams. In project teams, your goal is the project. In communities of practice, your passion is the project, right? So for example, if I am a photographer, right, working in AVLRC, right, and I know then that in IED, there is another photographer, right? So perhaps another, a part of the organization, but like very independent, but I still would like to actually start bonding with him, right? Because the problems I share is actually very similar to the problems he shares, right? So it's different from project teams and of course, informal networks. Now, I can take 5 more minutes, right? Okay, so the basic premise is that learning is situated. Learning, what these constructivists would say is that learning is not about getting the concepts and the conceptual structures. Learning is not about, is about what happens inside our mind, but that is not the thing for them, right? For social constructivists, they would say that actually where your work is, right? That work has a structure itself, right? So those structures matter. So social engagements that provide the proper context for learning to take place. So the conceptual structures are important, but actually the structures that are in real life, which perhaps we might not be seeing even, they actually matter, because there is where learning actually is actively happening. So in situated learning, they would say that it is not so much that learners acquire structures or models to understand the world, right? So it's not so much that you acquire concepts from books in order to understand something. It's actually you working within those frameworks, participating in those frameworks that have a structure, and you keep learning. So going back to the first slide, when we said it happens to individuals, of course it does. But then what people in communities of practice would say, that it happens actually in communities. An individual alone might not be learning that actively as a person who would actively, become a part of a community. He learns actually even more, right? Okay, let me tell you. I've seen this thing. I've noticed it. You go to the canteen, right? And then there you see groups of people coming. And of course, they are in these scrubs, right? Perhaps not that identifiable if they are from nursing or if they are residents, right? But you just notice what they're talking about, silently sitting there, right? I have noticed that whenever residents are sitting, they start talking about management. They start talking about a new medicine, a new neuroreceptor, right? Mode of actions. They start talking about that. I have noticed that whenever nurses are sitting, right, they start talking about scheduling. They start talking about finishing the work, things of those sort, right? So that's their repo and that. So if a resident keeps himself aloof from residents and would say, no, not going to talk to residents, just going to talk to consultants because I'm just learning from them. I won't sit with the residents. His learning would be affected. That is what communities of people would say, right? So it happens in communities. Similar goes with nurses, similar goes with medical educationists. So if you want to develop yourself as a medical educator, you have to interact with medical educationists. Has a beginning and an end? They would say no. Continuously keeps on evolving, and who evolves it? The people in the community. They keep on evolving it. Is best separated from other activities? No, it's actually there in the place of work in real life. You have to go there and learn it, right? It's situated. Is the result of teaching? No, they would say it's more of a result of participation. You participate in the work, you will start learning. So we tried to define communities of practice. We described a legitimate peripheral participation, and we explained situated learning. Coming back to Gilbert's law, he said the biggest problem in the world is that no one tells you how to do it. It is perhaps because you do not link yourself to the community. You're perhaps asking questions from the wrong people, right? So you link yourself to medical educators, you link yourself to the residents, you link yourself to secretaries, you link yourself to managers, you'll start learning, right? Because those are the places where the how is discussed. For example, let me give you an example, right? You hear this thing, crypto kharidiya, I bought crypto, I bought Bitcoin, right? And then you ask them, how do you buy Bitcoin? No one tells you how, right? They just keep telling you what they're doing, and they don't tell you how. Perhaps because you have to join a community of crypto people. Once you join there, you'll see it actually itself happening. So you learn the how there, right? So No one tells you how to do it, you just. See, we consider ourselves as what? As residents, as internal medicine people, as gastroenterologists, as surgeons, right? So we differentiate ourselves. But that is what William Kentridge is trying to tell us, that see, the outside world sees you as what? Just two doctors, all similar, no differences. That is what he has drawn, right? Look at them, same faces, same attire, something, same heights, everything, right? So thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Andali, for the wonderful presentation. Hello, can you hear me? Thank you, Dr. Andali, for the wonderful presentation. And now the session is open for discussion. For the panel discussion, we have invited some experts in medical, in the field of medical education. Our first panelist is Professor Roxana Awami-Zuberi. She is a professor emerita at Aga Khan University. She has master's in health professions education from the University of Illinois at Chicago, USA. Dr. Zuberi is an executive committee member, Association of Medical Education in Eastern Mediterranean region, member of the Aspire Academy, member of the Aspire Assessment Panel, and member of the Aspire Board of the Association of Medical Education in Europe. Our second panelist is Dr. Sayyida Kausar Ali. She has joined online, and Dr. Roxana Zuberi, she has also joined online. Dr. Kausar is among the earliest medical educationists in Pakistan with MHP from University of Illinois at Chicago and PhD from the University of Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Currently, she chairs the Institute of Medical Education at Janassan Medical University. She is the director of the PhD program in health professions education. Her research interests include educational measurement, program evaluation, and faculty development. And our third panelist is Dr. Shahid Shamim, and he is here. Dr. Shahid, he completed his master's in medical education from Dow University of Health Sciences, and PhD, he completed his PhD from University of New South Wales, Sydney, Australia. Currently, he's working as the Director of Graduate Programs and Faculty at Aga Khan University. He is an assessor for Famer Keel MHP program, supervisor for postgraduate students at different universities within and outside Pakistan, visiting faculty, and for MHP and CBAC Kenya Medical Research Institute projects, and reviewer for national and international journals. So I would like to invite Dr. Shahid, so please come here, and so that we can start the discussion. So the session is open for discussion, and we can take questions from the participants who have joined in person as well as physically online. So over to you, G.
So are there any questions, Amber, on Google Doc? Because I think you asked them to post the questions on Google.
Yeah.
So maybe we can start with those questions.
Okay, so we have received one question. How to overcome challenges encountered by COP? So
Okay.
that's the first question we have received from our online participant, G, Dr. Anjali, and the other panelist.
Yeah, so perhaps, the biggest challenge is that they do not exist formally, right? So there is no push, there is no pull, right? So perhaps so what you have to do is you identify people which you are a community of, right? And then you start interacting with them, right? Of course, the institution, you're taking the time, They might not like it a lot, but if the institution understands it, it's going to benefit a lot by having this exercise of communities of practice being developed.
Okay, any other comment from the panelists? Dr. Shahid, Dr. Zubairi, and Dr. Kausar, would you like to add
Yeah.
anything?
I would really like to add over here that, you see, whenever we are talking about communities of practice, first of all, thank you, Andalib. It was an excellent talk, and it was lovely to hear you after a long time. And I wish I would have been there. You would have met you. A challenge that I have found is that, you know, communities of practice, there are people, as Andalib has said, they are passionate about some aspect of learning, and they get together and then they work on. We formed a group of community of HPE practice, at least for Sindh. And a lot of people joined in with a lot of, you know, everybody was very excited. A challenge that I have faced is how to keep the momentum going, and, you know, how to encourage people to share what they are doing. I think that is something that is very important for survival of communities of practice. And I would really like to ask Andalib if he could shed some light on it.
I think Dr. Shahid also wants to say something, and after that, I'll say something.
Thank you, Dr. Zubairi. I think the way Andalib explained the community of practice with examples from healthcare and out of healthcare professions was really nice. And I hope everybody now understands, and especially our students and juniors who are here and online. There, something that I was hoping to see, but maybe the time was short, and Andalib took a lot of time in explaining very nicely. So I think that the examples of communities of practices is something that needs to be clarified. There are informal communities. There are communities on the WhatsApp groups. There are communities on the Facebook, but there are some formal communities also, which students, especially postgraduate students, can actually be a part of officially, you know, formally. Like, for example, the Society of Internal Medicine, Society of Surgeons, Society of Infectious Diseases. These are also communities of practice. And as Dr. Kausar was just saying, that forming a community is easy, but taking it forward or achieving what the community is supposed to achieve as a group is difficult. So when you have a formal community of practice, then there are presidents and vice presidents and general secretaries, and they are responsible for taking the community together to the next level. And I think that is something I just wanted to pitch in.
Thank you. So Dr. Shahid and Dr. Kausar, you're both actually talking about the same thing. Of course, examples. So let's take this example of HPE, which was formed, right? And HPE means Health Profession Educators. So they formed an Health Profession Educators community, right? And then they thought that it was very active in the beginning, but then perhaps. So the first thing is that with communities of practice, there are no goals. There are no goals, right? So you don't see anything being achieved, right? If there are goals, then perhaps it's a project team, right? So there are no goals. It's more about building the rapport. It's more about interacting. It doesn't tell you interaction for what, right? So for example, this HPE community in a medical education conference would say like, okay, but our HPE community would sit for half an hour at this time in the conference where things are not happening. And then they would do what? Perhaps just have coffee, right? And crack their own jokes, because our jokes are different. Our jokes are different, right? Our joke will be about an MCQ, right? Other people would not take it, but we really laugh on it, right? We can laugh on it. So this is how, like, the no goals, The interaction doesn't have to be formal. There should be no hierarchy, boss or no boss, right? The interaction doesn't need to be on the subject matter. It just have to be, developing. And once you develop these linkages, this connection, what happens is, then, you have the safety and the freedom to actually ask that person a question which you would actually not feel safe to ask anyone, right? And then that would be a WhatsApp message, because then you would see these questions coming up in those WhatsApp groups also, which perhaps are not being asked anywhere else, right? We have a medical educators community, a connection kind of a thing, and I keep posting all those questions, perhaps like which are more related to the community and our issue as our identification as medical educationists, but perhaps not to the subject matter.
Can I add to that, please?
Yes, Dr. Zuberi.
So if I may just try and separate out the word goal from task. Because the communities of practice, they have three major things that bring them together. One is a passion for something. And for us, that's medical education. The second is the dedication. The passion, the interest has to come with commitment. Commitment to further and share knowledge through participation, which is the third, which is the relationships and the interaction, etc. So if any of these things are not there, it goes. But the goal is there. We will want to further medical education, even if it's laughing about it, talking about it, living, eating, breathing it. But it is not a task. The moment it's not task oriented, we are not there to complete a task. The moment it's a task, it becomes a team. So when you look at communities of practice,
Dr. Zuberi, we can't hear you. Dr. Zuberi, can you hear me?
is very, very important in communities of practice because you're just learning by interacting. So one of the things that may have been missing, Kausar, is that maybe it was too formal. Because again, if you have a community of practice, if there's no dedication, they won't come together. They may have the same interest, but if there's going to be competition, they won't come together. If there's going to be competition, they won't share their knowledge. If there's going to be, so one of the major things is dedication to that interest, that dedication is above your own personal interest. And that actually is important. And that you see within departments of medical education, which, and you see within hand surgeons, you see with gastroenterologists, nahi hai to abhi hamare mein nahi hai, perhaps we haven't achieved that kind of maturity. But that I feel has been the main thing, that we are still trying to level a hierarchy or to come up with a hierarchy. Neither we are a task, a community of practice is neither a task-oriented team nor a social network. It's somewhere in the middle. It's difficult to understand. And to build a community of practice is then you have to call it a community of practice, not just a group of people coming together. Because when you're having a group of people coming together, then the goal is not clear. But in the community of practice, the goal is sharing information, generating knowledge through participation. I think that is the major key. So I just wanted to add that maybe we have yet didn't define it as a community of practice. Anyway, that's my point, that maybe now we can take some other questions also, I suppose.
Dr. Dilip wants to add something.
And see, for example, so in communities of practice, the concept is that the core keeps on fluctuating, right? So people who are more active will actually fall in core, right? And then they might go to periphery and someone else would be in the core. So there are no structured positions responsible for doing things.
Yes, Dr. Tariq.
Assalamu alaikum, it's Dr. Tariq.
Walaikum salam.
So now, as Andalib said and Dr. Zubairi said, I think I agree 100% with all these comments. And now the core of these communities of practice may fluctuate, but a number of times these people would remain there, but maybe silent. But at least they have this forum where they can ask questions whenever there is a need. Few of them are very actively involved. You would see in these kind of communities, there are top few people who are continuously writing and talking and talking. Some of them are in between and some of them do not talk at all. That's fine, but at least they are part of it. Whenever there is a need, they gain things out of it. So I think that's how it develops. Now we have a FAMER community of practice, which is now becoming huge and huge and huge. All FAMER fellows are part of this community of practice. And again, same thing is happening. A number of them are totally dormant, but whenever I am also not very much speaking there or maybe writing, but whenever there is a need, I pose questions and then I get a number of answers from different people from all around the world. So I think that's how these communities practice. These are usually, and I think most of the time these are informal, and I think a structure there would not be. Those societies are different. Those are again important entities like gastroenterology society, pulmonology society, cardiology. Those are all totally different things. But I think again within those societies, again communities develop. So yeah. So just wanted to add this.
Okay. Any
Yes.
other comment?
And just want to add one other thing. The core and the periphery may also depend on the area of interest or the area of expertise. The question that may be posed may be a certain area of expertise, that the core that answers those questions becomes different from the core that may answer a question about, say, research in health professions education may be different from the core that may form to answer about a question on assessment. And that core may be different when answering a question about situated learning or Wenger or Wenger and Lave and Vygotsky. So that is also how the core and the periphery change according to the areas of interests. So, and if it's the same people who remain at the core, then it loses interest for a large number of people. They feel that we are always at the periphery.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Zubairi. Okay, we will take another question. So the question is how to interact with medical educationists to gain knowledge on medical education as they don't have clinic. Okay, so how to interact with medical educationists to gain knowledge on medical education as they don't have clinic. This is, yes.
The communities of practice are the best way. Maybe Andali would like to answer that.
Yeah. And so, of course, you don't have to take an appointment. Go meet them, right? I have a question, right? Of course, you people in Aga Khan are doing this thing. I come from Zayuddin, right? You have done it. Yeah, karte kaise ho? How do you do it, right? That is it. No formal letters, nothing, right? No institutional secrecy matters. I'm a friend and you are a friend, right? Tell me something. We are at the same discipline. Now I see residents also sitting, right? Residents, doctors, staff physicians, students, right? See, students are a very strong community themselves.
Yes.
And I started doing an MBA from IBA, and I was working here as a faculty. There, when I used to go to IBA, I just used to become a student. Sari problems shuru ho jati thi. I like, why do they have to be in time all the time, right? Why do they have exams like this, right? How do we get the questions? I'm faculty, I'm working as a faculty, but right, in the evening, I used to become a student, right? So every community has its own issues, right? You interact with the students more, you actually are gonna learn more.
Yes. Absolutely.
So any other comment? Dr. Shahid,
I,
Dr. Kausar,
what
Dr.
I would
Dilip?
like to actually go back is for Andalip to comment on that slide in which I said there's learning taking place, where you're discussing the Pakistan's win with the Babar Azam's century. I think it's very important to know that learning takes place all the time. So before I say how it took place in my mind, I want Andalip to say how he would like to explain that. Because you know, the game of cricket or sports actually makes you learn so many things. They may be discussing cricket, but it's a team sport. It's something in which is ethics counts. It's something with talent and skill counts. It's something where practice counts. And that's part of life. Over to Andalip.
Yeah, so Dr. Zubairi has posed this question, right? And of course, you people are becoming doctors. So these three gentlemen standing over there and talking about cricket or soccer, whatever, right? And do you agree they're learning? Which kind of learning? Perhaps informal, right? Learning about sports, the technique he's using, fine. But is that going to help them in their practice?
Yes.
Is that going to help them in their daily work, this talk? Hmm? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Please use mic so that everyone can hear.
So maybe we can get a motivation from them, the way they are using different techniques to improve themselves and to improve their sports. The same way we can try to adapt something different to improve ourselves in our specialty.
Good, good. So there might be something coming out from that discussion related to which can be applied here. But if there is nothing, still, does it affect their learning in any ways?
No.
This talk, and people do this talk all the time, right?
Yeah.
मतलब canteen में जाके doctors बैठते हैं. Last night we went to a wedding and they start talking about wedding. Girls do that all the time, right? Does it help in their learning? No.
Maybe they get a break from that thing.
Yeah, okay. It provides them the break.
Yeah.
They develop that rapport, right?
Yes.
They develop that connection. Now, you know, they develop that friendship with that person, right? They develop that safety around where now they can ask other questions also. Yeah. So perhaps
Yes.
they were new, right? They just joined, right? But now they're developing that, you know, safe environment within themselves, the connection within themselves. So this talk actually helped them. So when they go back to patients, it actually is easier for them. The resistance, the friction is a little gone. Dr. Zubairi?
Yes, I 100% agree. It breaks down barriers. They're building rapport, they're building relationships, they're building ways that now the junior can talk to the senior because they've already got a platform where they have a shared interest in something else. So they can share knowledge more easily without limitation of hierarchy. That's what I wanted to say.
Yes,
I want to ask something else. As you said, we all are in a community of practice and there is no hierarchy and all. So why is there always a competition between sectors? Why all the sectors cannot communicate and work together? Because in the end, we have to serve the community. So why can we not all do this together? And why to have jealousy? Why to have competition?
Good
Okay.
question.
I think what Andalip was explaining with examples from informal settings about communities of practice is a way of looking at them as communities of practice. But when we talk about communities of practice in education, in training, then we are talking about having formal communities. We are not talking about having a chai ki dukaan pe communities of people sitting there, or maybe tailors, if को हम कह सकते हैं, because that's a profession, and it's a sort of a professional place where they learn. But when we are using, or when you want to use communities of practice as in a consciously for learning, then you have to consciously not have very strict objectives, but the literature says that people in the community of practice, only those people would learn who are coming there with the intention to learn. You can be part of 10 communities and you may not learn anything from them unless and until you are willing to, and your intentions are to learn. So when you're having an informal discussion on cricket or politics with your colleagues, as a junior person, if I'm with my senior colleagues, when I'm with Dr. Kausar and Dr. Zubairi, and they are having a gupshup and a laugh, I'm actually observing them, how the body language, the way they are arguing with each other, or the way they are giving counter arguments. And these are things that we have all learned from our seniors, and we keep on learning. And that is what, as Anjali was saying, that the informal learning, the learning without having strict objectives or outcomes written down, because that is something you cannot plan. So being a part of communities of practice is to have that environment where there are things you learn which you may not learn in structured curriculums. Dr. Zubairi, Dr. Kausar, if
I agree with you, Dr. Shahid
Yes.
Shamim. One of the things that I actually just want to say, let us not throw away the chai khana. It has been proved by history, the cafes of Paris were the hubs where philosophy and politics rose. And they were actually the basis, if you remember, of communities of practice of poets and philosophers, Voltaire, Sigmund Freud. They all got together at the Grand Cafe in Vienna. So even the chai khanas can be a place to get together. And actually, it's a very good place to interact. The faculty all get together in the faculty lounge. Having said that, actually, Dr. Shahid Shamim said absolutely correctly. You can ask questions, and the communities of practice are not only to ask questions, but also to generate knowledge. I just want to say that. And you can ask questions immediately, how to do it. The first slide, nobody tells you how to do it. If you want to know how, ask. How? Ask. Somebody from that listserv, from that group of people will reply. The WhatsApp groups are there, listservs are there. I think the MHP should have a listserv, and it should include people. We have a group of people from our class that graduated in 1966, O levels, long before people's grandparents were born. And some people are on it all the time. And some people will drop in when their own areas come. There we have a couple of artists on it, we have great politicians on it, we have great historians on it. So they will come in when their own area comes. And it is totally informal. There is no hierarchy whatsoever, in fact. So that becomes important. It's very interesting.
We have
Thank
one
you.
more question.
Yes, thank you.
Introduce
It's,
yourself. Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Satwat Hashmi. I'm from the Department of Biological and Biomedical Sciences, and also part-time DD. So I just want to have a comment. Thank you for your very nice talk. I think another example for community of practice within the students is for example, neuroscience interest group or the cardiovascular science interest groups. And those community of practice not only have students, but residents, faculty, or even interested students who are not even part of the medical school. So it's a kind of very good example where you do not have a hierarchy, you don't even have participants from the same cadre. It's already a kind of learning environment where you share experience and maybe learn. So two kinds of community of practice do exist at the medical school level. So just want to add that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very good example. But the main community of practice is the student body. Then again, the core will change when it's a neurosciences area. The core will change whether it's going to be an OB area. The core will change whether it's a community area. And within that community of practice, which will be the students of Aga Khan University, for example. So, I mean, that can also be. So that's a very good example, but I just like to stretch it, like to make it wider, more inclusive rather than exclusive. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zubairi. Any concluding comment or remark from the panelist and from the speaker?
I just have one remark and then I'm done. I just want to thank and say hello to Dr. Andalib Arshad and for coming here. I am so happy that you are here and I'm so happy to see you, and I miss being with you because of the rains. Allah hamesha tumhe khush rakhe. Number two, Dr. Shahid Shamim, it is such a pleasure to have you on board. This is the first time we're interacting. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just like to add over here, of course, it was a pleasure to hear Andalib after a long time. And Andalib hasn't changed a lot. Dr. Zubairi in his mashallah delivery, it is as very, very soft spoken, taking time. I really liked it. Excellent, really. I just want to add one thing, that for community of practice, I think it is essential that there is a sense of respect in that community. So there will be seniors and there will be juniors, there will be students, but it will only work if there is a sense of mutual respect within that community, so that anybody can ask any question and anybody can share any knowledge without fear. Because Dr. Shaur, one of our online participants, had said that there may be hesitancy in the people when they would not want to ask questions or share. The hesitancy will go away if there is a sense of mutual respect. And I think that is essential. So again, that's just what I wanted to add for COP.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Amber, for giving the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Kausar and Dr.
Let me
Zubairi.
please thank our participants in Zoom. There were people from India, there were people from Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. So thank them very much. Yeah.
So
Thank
with
you for your time.
this, we conclude our session. Thank you for all the participants, our speaker for the wonderful presentation, panelist, Dr. Kausar, Dr. Zubairi, Dr. Shahid Shamim. Thank you for taking your time out and attended this session, and our participants who have joined physically as well as online. Thank you so much for your participation. Thank you. Dr. Okay, so I would request Dr. Tariq to please give a bouquet to Dr. Andalib.